We are joined on the line by Senator Ted Cruz, of course, Senator from Texas. He's host of Verdict, available anywhere you get podcasts as well. Senator Cruz, good to talk to you again, sir.
Ben, always good to be with you.
So let's talk about your new proposal to prevent Democrats from packing the court. So Democrats refuse studiously to avoid saying they will pack the court, which suggests that they obviously want to pack the court. You're proposing a constitutional amendment that would essentially set the number of justices at 9 on the Supreme Court. What are your hopes for getting something like that through in a time when the Senate can't even decide whether or not to pass like a simple budget proposal?
Well, I don't think it has a high prospect of being passed. I think the Nancy Pelosi House would never pass it. But I do think it has a reasonable prospect of being voted on and getting every Senate Democrat on record. Right now, they're playing a game where all of them, I believe, intend to pack the court if they win. But they don't want to admit that because that's a very unpopular position with the American people. It's why Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are doing such gymnastics to avoid answering the question. And so I'm hopeful that between now and Election Day, that Senate leadership will tee this up for a vote and get every Senate Democrat on record.
So the fact that the Democrats continue to flirt with packing the court is a pretty astonishing thing. I mean, they've already politicized the court in their court picks and in their refusal to even listen to the ideas of originalists. But the idea of packing the court really does fundamentally break the system. Combine that with the fact that they are talking about getting rid of the filibuster and adding states to the Senate. And what you're talking about right now is bringing a grinding halt to the institutional trust of the United States, which is already incredibly fragile at this point.
I think that's right. And the Democratic Party today is being driven by the extreme left. It's being driven by Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and AOC. If we wake up and the government is run by Biden, Schumer, and Pelosi, it's Katie bar the door. I mean, that they will. There is nothing too extreme or radical. I think you're right that they'll add 2 states to the union because they think that'll give them 4 new Democratic senators. I think they'll do that at the outset. I think it's 100% that they will end the filibuster. And when it comes to packing the court, it's interesting. I think a lot of people right now still dismiss that threat. These Democrats are deadly serious. If they weren't, it would be an easy thing for Joe Biden to say no to. But he's not going to say no because they intend to do it. And I'll tell you, one of the biggest tells that they intend to pack the court is the talking point went out about 2 weeks ago that every Democrat follows. And I got to say, I admire the message discipline of Democrats. When they put a talking point out, everyone down to the dog catcher in Dubuque on the Democratic side says word for word the same thing. Their latest talking point is Orwellian in nature. It is to redefine what it means to pack the court. So their talking point is, well, Republicans have been packing the court for the last 4 years. Well, no. Packing the court does not mean filling vacancies. That's something presidents of both parties do. That's one of the things that happens. Packing the court does not mean confirming or not confirming nominees. That's what the Senate does under the Constitution. Packing the court means one thing very specific. It is adding justices to the U.S. Supreme Court to put your cronies on there and to try to take it over. FDR tried to do that. He tried to expand the court from 9 justices to 15 justices. He tried that in 1937. And even though he had massive Democratic majorities in both houses, his own party told him no because it would destroy the independence of the judiciary and it would politicize the court. What FDR tried and failed to do, that's what Joe Biden intends to do, I believe, if they win.
So talking about, where things stand in the actual race, obviously the Senate races, everybody seems to be ignoring them on behalf of the presidential races, which I think is a huge mistake. I mean, the presidential race is going to go how the presidential race goes. Everybody's focused in on it. I think everybody's mind is basically made up. But the margins of these Senate races are extraordinarily close, from Iowa to North Carolina, from Maine to Michigan. I mean, there are a lot of very close Senate races. Putting aside the killing of the filibuster, which, as you say, will happen, what do you think is the first move Democrats will make in terms of policy if they were to win the Senate as well as the presidency?
Look, the last hope we have for the republic, if God forbid Joe Biden is elected president, is to hold on to a slim majority in the Senate, because that's the only institution capable of standing up to the radical left. If Chuck Schumer is the majority leader, as a functional matter, AOC will be majority leader. I'll tell you why. Because Schumer will be terrified of being primaried from the left in New York State. He's seen Democrat after Democrat beaten with a primary from the left. I believe there is nothing that AOC demands that Schumer would say no to, because he wants to protect his left flank. So I think they will end the filibuster immediately. I think packing the court, I think expanding the number of states, I think granting amnesty to every illegal alien in the United States and trying to make them voters as quickly as possible. And, when it comes to packing the court, so that would mean in the first 6 months of next year, we would be seeing probably 4 new Supreme Court justices. They would all be hard leftists. And what does that mean? Well, as you know, Ben, I have a brand new book called One Vote Away, How a Single Supreme Court Seat Can Change History. That book answers that very question. What is it that's at stake for you at home? The book, each chapter goes through the fundamental rights that are hanging in the balance: free speech, religious liberty, the Second Amendment, all of our basic rights that we're right now one vote away. And if the Democrats take power and they put 4 leftist justices, your and my free speech rights will be taken away. Our religious liberty rights will be taken away. Our Second Amendment rights will be taken away. And I wrote this book to come out right now, right before the election, for people to read and understand. If I want to have these freedoms going forward, the presidential election matters and the Senate elections matter enormously.
So speaking of your book, One Vote Away, How a Single Supreme Court Seat Can Change History, Senator Cruz, I'm sure you've been following this Supreme Court decision. There's a 4-4 split on whether to rule on a Pennsylvania decision. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which is appointed in partisan fashion, it's actually elected. It's not even appointed. Ruled 4-3 along Democrat-Republican lines that essentially they should be allowed to count votes up to 3 days after the election, and that postmarks are not required. So you could theoretically vote after the date of the election and have your vote counted in the state of Pennsylvania. John Roberts sided with the court's liberals. Your book is titled One Vote Away, but it seems like for conservatives, success on the Supreme Court level is always one vote away. It's very irritating. It's hard to think of how many 5-4 decisions have come down on behalf of liberal causes by Republican appointees. This seems like another one where it's tied 4-4. And now, as Andy McCarthy at National Review has pointed out, if Amy Coney Barrett becomes Justice Amy Coney Barrett, and this election issue comes down to Pennsylvania and votes being counted after the election, you're going to have the specter of the Supreme Court split 6-3 with Republican appointees, but 5-4, if you include Roberts with the liberals, ruling on the issue of which ballots can be counted, which I can't think of a situation more calibrated to destroy confidence in the Supreme Court.
Well, that is exactly right, and it's something that I think the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, as with Democratic governors across the country, they're all trying to set up a scenario that invites voter fraud, that invites people to vote in Pennsylvania after Election Day, after you see the result, to cast fraudulent votes, and I think that's profoundly dangerous. The issue with John Roberts is an enormous challenge. The last chapter of my book goes through a history of Supreme Court nominees going back to Dwight D. Eisenhower, and I discussed John Roberts at great length. I've known John 25 years. He's a friend of mine, but it is sad to see what has happened to John Roberts on the court. John Roberts has become the new Sandra Day O'Connor, and I think he despises Donald Trump. I think it is personal. I think it is visceral. It is difficult to think of two human beings more antithetical than John Roberts and Donald Trump. And I think that's profoundly dangerous. There's another chapter of my book that talks about Bush versus Gore and democracy. And the last time we had a contested election was 20 years ago. I was part of the legal team representing George W. Bush in that matter. I was a young lawyer working on the campaign. Actually, Heidi and I met on the campaign. We were in cubicles about 20 feet apart from each other. And if you remember what happened the last time we faced this, on Election Day, George W. Bush won. But in Florida, the margin was very close. And so Al Gore sent in an army of lawyers to file lawsuits all over the state challenging the outcome. And I went to Florida. I was in Tallahassee for the entirety of the recount. It was utter chaos. We had, in the war room, we had a whiteboard with a chart of 7 different lawsuits, all of which were pending simultaneously. any one of which could cost the presidency of the United States. The case went twice to the U.S. Supreme Court. The first time, we won unanimously, 9-0. The Supreme Court said what the Florida Supreme Court, which was a partisan Democratic court, what it had done was wrong. It sent it back. The second time we went to the Supreme Court, on the question of remedy, the outcome, the court split 5-4. And the court concluded 5-4 that enough was enough. The votes had been counted 4 separate times. George W. Bush had won all 4 times. And under the law, you couldn't keep counting and counting and counting and counting. And the election was over. 36 days, we had chaos and uncertainty, and the United States and the world didn't know who our next president was going to be. This time around, we could see it markedly worse. Instead of just one state, Florida, we could see litigation in 2, 3, 4, 5 states simultaneously. It's one of the most critical reasons we need a 9th justice so the court doesn't split 4-4, so that there is a full court that is able to resolve whatever election disputes come up.
Now, Senator Ted Cruz, his book is One Vote Away: How a Single Supreme Court Seat Can Change History. So, Senator Cruz, final question for you. Obviously, final presidential debate coming up on Thursday. The moderators have decided that now they'll be able to mute the mics during those 2-minute segments where people speak. Trump obviously trailing in the national polling. What should Trump's strategy be in the debate coming up on Thursday night, considering that, as always, he will be fighting not only the Democrat, but also presumably the moderator?
Well, I'll tell you who I wish there was a mute button on the mic is the moderator. The moderators have been a train wreck in every one of these debates. They are partisan leftists. It is idiotic. Republicans going forward, we shouldn't allow this to happen. I have suggested we need to totally revamp debates. In presidential primaries, the Republican primaries, primary debates ought to be moderated by people who actually will vote in the Republican primary. We have primary debates moderated by a bunch of lefties who want every Republican to lose. And then general election debates, let's stop playing this game where partisan lefty Democrats moderate debates and try to torpedo the Republican. Let's instead of hiding and pretending the bias doesn't exist, let's acknowledge it and own it, and have, as moderators, one open conservative and one open liberal. And so, for example, I would love to see a presidential debate moderated by, say, you, Ben Shapiro, and, say, Rachel Maddow, and just not hide it. You're a conservative. She's a liberal. You're going to ask tough questions that Democrats have never heard a moderator ask, and Maddow will ask, frankly, the same questions any other reporter would ask, but it at least makes the bias open and transparent. That's what we ought to do. For this election, you asked me what Trump should do. Focus on issues and substance. Don't interrupt and yell and scream. Don't make it a personality show. The Democrats want this to be a personality contest. This needs to be a battle of ideas. If it's a contest between free enterprise and socialism, we win. If it's a contest between the rule of law and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights versus anarchy and riots in the street, we win. But Trump's going to have to make it that, because the moderator and Joe Biden don't want it to be focused on ideas on the Supreme Court. Trump, the first question of the last debate is why did you nominate Judge Barrett? Unfortunately, President Trump said, well, because I can and I won. The answer that I hope he gives next time is because we need a justice to preserve your free speech rights, because we need a justice to preserve your religious liberty, because we need a justice to preserve your Second Amendment, and Joe Biden wants to appoint justices who will take away those rights. We need to focus on the terrain of the battlefield of ideas. That's how we win.
Well, Senator Ted Cruz, his new book is One Vote Away: How a Single Supreme Court Seat Can Change History. Senator Cruz, good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you. By the way, Ben, you didn't respond. Would you enjoy moderating a debate with Rachel Maddow?
Oh, that'd be a party, man. I mean, first of all, it'd be so much fun. It'd be so much better than what we've been watching, which is just terrible in every way. I'm very much looking forward to Kristen Welker ignoring anything good about Trump. It'll be very exciting.
It would be spectacular, and you could do another debate with, Mark Levin and Chris Cuomo. You could do
honestly,
Hannity,
these would be so much
Chris
more
Hayes.
watchable. The ratings would be so much better. It would be much more watchable. I totally agree with you. Full objectivity is the death of journalism. So, Senator Cruz, good to talk to you.
Take care.